But right now, here we go for Cleared to Play, where we take you inside the tent, get you updated on the latest injuries in the Bay. Proud to partner with UCSF Health on this segment and bring in Dr. Brian Feeley. Doc, great to have you. De'Aaron Fox says he's going to play. What are your thoughts on the injury as you see it?
Yeah, I think with this type of fracture, assuming it's just a small fracture at the very distal part of his finger, it's going to hurt, but there's no reason for him not to play. And as one of my colleagues mentioned, it's kind of win-win. If he plays and he plays great, he's a hero. And everyone says he played through this injury. If he plays and doesn't play so great, or he tries and just can't do it, he tried and his finger is injured and he's got a good excuse. So my assumption is he'll play. It probably won't limit him as much as I'm hoping it will. And it's something they'll keep an eye on during the game and see how it feels.
Which movements will be the most limited and the most impacted by this avulsion fracture, the dribbling or the shooting?
Yeah, I think the shooting in particular, because you can't really, it's not like something where you can buddy tape it to the middle finger and protect it. You've got to have that spread when you're shooting. And the way these guys shoot and they roll it off the tip of their finger to get that spin, that's going to bother them more. The other thing that's going to bother them are just all the defensive moves where you jam your finger a little bit. Think about having a hangnail, and every single time you catch it on something, this is exponentially worse, obviously, but every time he bangs his finger, it's going to be distracting for him.
Well, and maybe more than just distracting, I guess that's the obvious next question. Dr. Brian Feeley with us, which is if this gets bumped, banged, aggravated, does this immediately get worse?
You know, for a lot of small fractures, what the concern is, it's going to get really swollen. If it really swells up, it's going to be harder for him to have a good shooting touch. And one of the things that was brought up was, well, after this happened with about 4 minutes left in Game 4, he still made a couple crucial shots, including that three, but it hasn't swollen yet. So it really depends on how swollen he is, how much they can manage the swelling during the game. My guess is in between, when he's on the bench, they're going to have him iced up. They're going to have him resting his finger, keep it elevated, try to keep it as the pain as managed as well as possible. But you also can't numb up the tip of the finger because then he can't shoot as well.
What sort of a pregame treatment can he get in terms of injections? And we know a lot about, Toradol in the NFL and injections like that. With the finger and it being this close to the tip, is there anything they can do to try to manage the pain from the start of the game and maybe even at halftime?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, he could have an anti-inflammatory injection or oral anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen or an injection of Toradol. You can't numb it up. So we talk about, like, sometimes when players have rib fractures, you can numb up the area so you just don't feel it. The problem is if you do that at the tip of the finger, you lose that shooting touch. So it'll probably be a game-time decision. I think most of it really is done between Game 4 and 5 and really managing that swelling, trying to keep that to a minimum before he even starts trying to play.
Doc, I'm interested in your perspective on someone like Kawhi Leonard and the discussion that surrounds it. They've got an elimination game tonight. He is not going to play. He's got a knee sprain, and people seem to be accusing him of load management in the playoffs, even though the likelihood is his season comes to an end tonight. What's your thought on what you're seeing play out there?
Oh, man, it's tough because nobody can feel Kawhi's knee except for him. And I think the fact that Tyronn Lue has backed him up, I think probably means his knee really is injured. And I think if you look at probably a good comp is a couple years ago in the playoffs when Steph Curry had that relatively mild MCL sprain. He missed a couple weeks. And for the first week, there was no way anybody was talking about him coming back. Came back, I think, at day 10 or 11. My guess is Kawhi has something like this where he has a mild knee sprain, but a mild knee sprain when you're you can't really play. So it's tough because of his injury history, the fact that he has seemed to sit out for a lot of different injuries for an extended period of time. But at the same time, nobody is in his knee other than himself. So I would put the benefit of the doubt on the player not wanting to protect his knee, not feeling like he can play, and not blame him for not wanting to play.
Watching Ja Morant last night with the Memphis Grizzlies play with reckless abandon, even though he has a wrap on his right hand, had me concerned. What do you make of Ja Morant and the nature of his myriad injuries as he tries to make it through this series.
Yeah, I think clearly his wrist looks bad. I don't know if you saw his elbow, but he's got this massive bump on the back of his elbow that probably doesn't hurt that much, but looks even worse. And I think that's just his playing style. He plays at 110%. He's all out. His wrist clearly is feeling good enough for him to score 38 one game, but probably bothered him enough to shoot under 30% last night. So, hats off for him to push hard. It probably is affecting his shooting a little bit, though.
Dr. Brian Feeley cleared to play. Doc, the Giants are having their most optimistic moment of the season so far with a 3-game win streak. However, they've got a problem at the catcher position. Absolutely no depth. And Joey Bart sort of limped into second base last night and then was taken out of the game. It's a groin injury that they say is lingering. What do you think are the prospects for him, and how long might he be out?
Yeah, it's hard, especially with a lingering injury. And the concern can be anything from, this is just a chronic mild sprain and he needs a few more weeks to get better, or something more serious. And I think one thing to consider is something along the lines of what Gary Payton, too, had. He had that, what we thought was a groin injury at first, but then it was a core muscle injury that ended up needing surgery and prolonged rehab. So hopefully this is just some groin tightness, not even a real sprain, and they're just being really careful because there isn't really much of a backup. And I think the main point is to get him the rest he needs early, so he's not going to have a period of time where he's missing 2-3 months during the season.
Doc, great stuff. Wonderful to have you as always, especially with this big De'Aaron Fox thing going on. That was really good. Thanks so much, my man.
All right. Take care, guys. Go Warriors.
Indeed. Doc Brian Feeley. The proceeding was sponsored by UCSF Health.